And joining me now, Sinan Olgan, who is a former Turkish diplomat and a visiting scholar at Carnegie Europe, and Hadi Al-Bahra, who is a former president of the National Coalition for Syrian Revolutionary and Opposition Forces based in Istanbul. Thank you both for joining me today. Hadi, I'll start with you. As we know, all signs are pointing toward an imminent attack on Idlib, and the UN is predicting this could be a humanitarian catastrophe. What impact could this upcoming offensive on Idlib have on neighboring countries such as Turkey and Lebanon? What kind of effects could they see with the refugees?
Yeah, if we put things in perspective, we are talking about an area, a very small area with close to 4 million people. There are 1,600,000 people in this area of people who were being displaced previously. And these, most probably, if any violence in this region or if the war rage, they will have no way but to seek refuge in neighboring countries. So they will flood Turkey, and you know Turkey already has 3.5 million Syrian refugees. So most probably these guys, they have no way except to go and seek refuge in Europe.
We've already seen some 6 million refugees have to flee Syria, and now some politicians are saying that it's safe for them to return to Syria. But how can these refugees return to a home where they have nothing, and how logistically would that be possible?
It's impossible, because these people are from inside Syria and they seek refuge in Idlib, and even this area is not secure enough. They're running out from brutal regime who is seeking to kill them. You have a wanted list by the regime of 3 million people on this list. You have many of them, their homes are destroyed, their families, one member of their family killed. So there is no way for them to provide their safety, to let them feel secure, nor even to provide them with basic services. You are talking about a country with 65% of its infrastructure already destroyed.
Sinan, I know the EU is supporting Turkey's efforts in trying to avert a humanitarian crisis in the region. Europe, as we know, has seen a huge influx as well of refugees in recent years. How could Europe be affected by this upcoming offensive in Idlib as well?
Yes, obviously. I mean, there is fear in Europe that if there is indeed a new humanitarian wave, firstly to Turkey and then onwards to Europe, that could cause serious problems, both from the humanitarian perspective, but also from a political perspective, given that in a number of European countries there has been a reaction, even to a small number of Syrian refugees being granted access to those countries. So that's really the fear, and chief among those countries that look at this with concern is Germany. And that is why we have seen increasingly a dialogue with Turkish authorities about potential assistance, with the thinking that with this assistance, Turkey will be able to manage this new wave of refugees if it comes to that.
What does this mean for European-Turkey relations as far as both sides working together? Could this perhaps be an opportunity for relations to become closer?
In a way, yes. But of course, what we've seen in the past is that Europe is very concerned about the sustainability of the refugee deal with Turkey. But it doesn't necessarily go beyond that. So there will be incentive for Europe to hold on to its commitments and to comply with its commitments under the refugee deal. But we shouldn't really extrapolate from that and really think that the Turkey-EU relationship will greatly improve just because of the refugee situation.
Hadi, is there a solution possible in Syria with Bashar al-Assad remaining in power?
Bashar al-Assad is the cause of what's going on. You know, it's a cause of instability in the whole region. Bashar al-Assad, he imported the interference of other countries inside Syria and in the region. So now the Syrian crisis, it's not about Syria anymore. It's more of an international crisis and regional crisis also. So Bashar al-Assad has to agree for a political settlement which paved the way into a democracy, real democracy, and real political transition inside Syria.
And Sinan, I'll ask the same question of you. Will there be a solution with Assad remaining in power?
Well, one tends to think that the answer would be no, for all the reasons that we've discussed here. But realistically, the situation on the ground has changed so much to the benefit of Assad that right now it's difficult to see how the international community can force a solution without Assad. And we've seen this as well in the attitude of the governments, where now both, even in Turkey, but also in the US, there has been much less talk about regime change.
What's at stake really for Turkey here, aside from the mass migration? Why is Turkey so insistent on preventing the Idlib offensive?
Yeah. Well, one reason is indeed, the numbers. Already Turkey is host to more than 3 million Syrian refugees. When we look at Idlib, a population of between 3.5 and 4 million, that has a potential to greatly increase the number of refugees. That's one concern. But the other concern is, unlike past waves of refugee flows, we also know that in Idlib there is a concentration of jihadis. And there is therefore the possibility that they may get mixed in the number of civilians that intend to come to Turkey. And the fact that there are so many of them is going to be a hugely difficult issue for Turkish authorities to filter who's coming, who's not coming in a situation that possibly can become quite acute in humanitarian terms. So the threat, therefore, for Turkey is that this could lead also to a very security challenge, allowing some of these jihadists to cross the border.
And Hadi, let's talk about the demographics of Idlib. What makes this region such a challenge?
It is first, it's mountainous area, an area rich in its agriculture land, but also it had more than the original people of this area, around 2,200,000. Now we are talking about almost double the population in such a tight place. So, and as he said exactly, the jihadists and mainly the foreign fighters mainly concentrated in this area, which constitute a risk to the local communities and a risk also to neighboring countries. So this is a challenge which has to be managed in a smart way, because you cannot go with full force military operation where you subject all the civilian into high risk, and large losses among them. So Turkey trying to find a smart way, middle way of how to handle this issue clearly, putting the priority first on how to protect the civilian population in this area.
Let's talk about what this means for the international community a little bit broader, Sinan, because we have Turkey who's been, fortifying its zones around Idlib, and Russia is saying the ceasefire is not working, and we have the U.S. in there. What does it mean for the broader international community if this Idlib offensive takes place?
Well, it's basically what when we look at now the statements coming out from the international community broadly, they're pretty much supportive of the Turkish position, which is being to essentially preempt a military campaign against Idlib, and allow some of these actors to separate the jihadis from the rest of the population. That's the plan that Turkey submitted. But from Russia and Iran's perspective, the message that we're getting is that that window of opportunity is closing, and it's closing down fast. Now, we also have to bear in mind that there's an incentive for the regime to break this solution. Namely, given how they've acted in other regions, the incentive for the regime would be to attack with force, to depopulate Idlib, to force a migration towards Turkey. And I think the international community should be really aware of what drives the regime and what drives the regime's actions. And that's why I think it's important that we hear more messages of political support to Turkish position, which should at some point also translate into concrete support, whether it's in the humanitarian area or mostly in the humanitarian area going forward.
All right, Hadi Al-Bahra and Sinan Olgan, thank you both.